Good thing I only spilled water. Welcome to the cold month of November. November is always a weird month, a time where the season hasn't changed yet, but we're in the back half of fall, the quieter half. October and September are always rambunctious, back to school, holiday loudness, but November is so liminal comparatively. Not quite the uplifting moods of December, but we've just gone past all the Halloween spirit. I think that urban fantasy, wizard politics is the exact vibe I want to carry through this month. And to kick this theme off, we have An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. An Unkindness of Magicians takes place in New York City, following characters that exist in the unseen world of magic. The unseen world has been rolling on for as long as the city has been, so there are plenty of deep-rooted social and familial connections, old feuds not ready to die, new betrayals fueling fresh tension, all of which has formed the current power structures of the family houses that make up the unseen world. Every generation or so, there is a magical tournament to determine the new hierarchy of the unseen world. This tournament is called the Turning. Each family has a champion representative to take part in the turning. Whichever family the winning champion represents gains control over the unseen worlds until the next turning. Our protagonist, Sydney, new to the unseen world, is competing for reasons of revenge in the turning. She has hopes of being the Khaleesi of this world and breaking the wheel of structures and all that. The book is filled with a large number of points of view. Each point of view helps to give the reader a holistic perspective of the unseen world. We see the bureaucracy, we see the backroom deals, we see how one goes about learning magic in this world, and more importantly, we see all of the dark aspects. All of the aspects that no one wants to look at, but are necessary in keeping this whole world moving. I think the multiple perspectives serve that purpose very well, and the perspectives are distinct enough to be able to keep them apart. Though I have read a lot of Brandon Sanderson and George R.R. Martin, so I am pretty trained in the ways of keeping multiple points of view straight, I think it's still fairly easy in this book to keep track of all the different perspectives that you're bouncing between. The magic system in this book is much softer than I had expected it to be, and sometimes that allows for amazing scenes with beautiful imagery and language as someone casts a new spell. But then we get scenes that feel cheap or like they are cheated away from us as readers, because the magic system at times is unknown to us. We can't possibly sort out how a battle could go down as a reader. It has to be told to us by the author. And I think this is potentially the weakest point in the book. The main focus of this book feels like it should be the wizard tournaments. All the duels and a lot of the tension coming from who's gonna live and who's gonna die. Spells being flung left and right. Reflex saves being made probably. But almost always, these tournament fights are battles of poetry. And often, hardly 2 spells are cast before the fight is over. Now don't get me wrong, I really love this magic. I think the writing style is the strongest part of this book. And because of the nature of magic and writing, beautiful writing will always elevate the magic. I think the descriptions for the many different spells and how they must be cast are interesting and vibrant, and the spell effects are described so thoughtfully. But I was excited for the fights in a different way than they are presented to us, and so it takes a bit of a hit for me in that aspect. Because of the many points of view in this book, we get a lot of the subplots that seem to be driving more of the tension than the main plot. There's a murder mystery and mage politics, and both of these things are really awesome when you're reading about them. They are the propellant to keep you going in this book for sure. And to me, I really enjoyed the cast of characters, so meeting a character from one perspective to later see them from a different point of view, and contrasting those interactions that we get to experience made it really awesome for me. I like that kind of story where you can perceive a character as a goofy chum friend in one chapter, and then they are presented with much more power over the next point of view character, so our perception of them distorts. I think this creates a lot of depth in a world, and in this book, I think it's done extremely well. This is obviously a classic urban fantasy book set in New York City, so you get some awesome descriptions of New York, you get some reframings of classic New York monuments for the magic world, and I think that that's done really well. So if you're a lover of, New York and urban fantasy, I think you'll love this book. If you love softer magic systems, I think that the weaknesses that I give it are probably going to be less impactful weaknesses for you. This book, I think, is a more plot-centric style, but matches the language style of the Night Circus. And if you like anime and, you've seen Fate Zero, I think this gives a very similar vibe to that, where you have all those different magic houses who have a champion who are then fighting for this power. It's a pretty fast and short read. It's only around 77,000 words. For a gauge, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was also around 77,000 words, so if that helps. If this at all piques your interest, please check it out. I'll link the book in the description below for sure. And here's normally where I would end the video, but I actually have different plans for my second video this week. And I don't have a crazy amount of extra that I want to talk about for this book, so I figured I'd try something else out. I figured I would try tossing in my spoiler review at the end of this video. I might be doing this a bit more often, I might not, who knows. But for now, this is your spoiler warning for An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. You better be ready, because we about to dive into it. Okay, spoiler 1. I don't like this kind of ending. I always hate an ending where the main character loses power and then the world just keeps going on without them. This happened in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood as well, and I wasn't super wild about it there. Having them be powerful and in the forefront of leading that new world order, I think is really important for the safety of the society that they have helped to change. But maybe I'm alone in that. Maybe people like sad endings. I think the biggest and most fair criticism lobbyied against this book is that the main character feels OP. I feel like that really comes down to two things: not having a comparable protagonist that can go against her, and a lack of understanding from the reader's perspective of the magic system. The antagonists of the story never really outsmart her in any way, and her duels end very swiftly by her hand or by some outside force, so it's really hard to ever feel tension in terms of the safety of Sydney. Miles Merlin, I feel, is like he's just as desperately trying to hold on to this world as Sydney is trying to destroy it, but he doesn't have any magic, so it's really hard for him to enforce that through direct power. And I feel like if he had more direct power, we might be able to see a bit more interesting fights take place between Sydney and Miles. It kind of sucks that we don't actually get to see how great and strong this leader of the unseen world is. And then the fight between Gray is fairly forgettable. It's not super important, but it feels like it should be, because if you have the two antagonists, it's going to be Miles, who doesn't have any power, and Gray, who has been slowly stealing and building up power this whole entire book, but then it just fizzles out. And so there continues to be no tension between Sydney and any of the antagonists. However, I do think that there is a lot of tension built in the lawyer subplot arc with Madison and Harper. This is where the tension felt really strong, and you were worried for the well-being of these characters because they're not OP magicians. One is a human who knows about the unseen world, and the other is just a lawyer who happens to have powers. She's not some overpowered person. She's not some great magician in the world. She's just a lawyer. I think had we seen more important characters around Sydney die, or watched Sydney fail to an outside force, the tension would have felt a lot better, and the stakes would have felt a lot higher for that matter. The lack of understanding for how the spell system works is the other half of this loss of tension, I feel. Not knowing what someone could possibly do, and also not knowing how your main character can respond and defend themselves, really makes for non-important fights. Especially when, as a reader, you can't even discern the difference of power levels between these characters, and they might even seem equal to you because of your lack of knowledge of this world. Our lack of understanding of this magic ultimately makes Sydney look like an OP Superman. And that really sucks, because I think that she has an interesting character arc, but her powers just can carry her through it. We don't even know how close she's cutting it with some of these fights until way afterwards when the magic backlash kicks in. So it's incredibly fair to walk away from every fight thinking she just sweeped. Brandon Sanderson says it best for magic systems: if you have a soft magic system and the villain does something and it feels cheaty, that's okay. But when a protagonist does it, it feels to the reader like you've been cheated out of good tension or a good solution to a problem. If we had even just seen way more power coming from our antagonists, I feel like the softness of the magic would have been totally fine and the tension would still be intact. But the only person that she truly fears is in the House of Shadows, and even at the end, she walks right through that having no problem destroying it. So it's very hard to gauge power levels in this book. And I think that tension is successfully built well in other parts of this book. Our main protagonist, we get to just watch John Wick her way through this entire tournament, and that's okay sometimes. I love that kind of story, but I suppose some people want to be aware that that's the kind of story they're getting into at the beginning, so that they can better prep their expectations of how this character is going to grow, and that doesn't happen in this book, unfortunately. Another side complaint: I wish we saw a bit more mundanity of the unseen world, saw more of the day-to-day magician lifestyles. A lot of the time when we see characters interacting, it has a lot to do with the politics, and it has a lot to do with the mysteries, and it has a lot to do with the turning, but they're never just sitting down and doing day-to-day duties of being in this world. If we could have gotten a few scenes like Harry sitting in Ron's house, watching his whole family go about their morning breakfast routine, I think it would have done a lot for world building in this story. Cat Howard even gives us this awesome idea for like a magic smart house. It could change its appearance based on who the current controller of the house is, as well as function as most of the wait staff for the house, and it also seems like it's pretty sentient in some way. But Sydney refuses to use it because of her trauma, and that takes away our only chance of really getting to understand how this house works, because she's new to experiencing it, and she's the only POV that would be new to experiencing this kind of smart house. We get to know just enough from the other points of view that I want to know more, and then we're offered the opportunity to know more, and the main character laughs at us, and she just doesn't choose to do that for us. And that made me probably more upset than it should have, but it made me upset because I was really interested in those houses. But ultimately, I loved the storyline with Gray. I love the twists that get thrown at us and the interactions between Sydney and many of the characters in this world. Her and Miranda have an awesome relationship with each other in this story, and I think that we get to see that played out pretty well. The litigation detective thriller that happens in the background with Harper and Madison is a ton of fun to read. And ultimately, I'll always wish for the moon in a book when I hear a premise, and I know my expectations need to be tamped. I was certainly caught up in the drama of the turning and the beauty of the language in this story, and so I definitely recommend it. And there we have it. There's our full breakdown for An Unkindness of Magicians by Cat Howard. If you liked anything that I said here, or you found anything interesting, or you end up reading this book because of this, hit me with that like, hit me with a subscribe if you haven't already. And I want to know what your favorite wizard urban fantasy focused story is. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a great day. Stay lit.